Hey guys, welcome to the Cinema Corral. This is the section of my YouTube channel where I review the latest releases. In this video I'm going to be talking about the movies that came out on the weekend of May 24th, 2019. That includes Brightburn, Aladdin 2019, The Biggest Little Farm, Booksmart, and Photograph. So let's begin. Alright, so let's get the biggest film of the week out of the way. Aladdin. This is obviously a remake of the 1992 Disney animated classic, and I did not hate this. I was fully expecting to absolutely loathe everything about this film going in. As you know, if you watch my channel, I am not a fan of these Disney remakes. I think they're pointless, and they rarely ever exceed the quality of the original. And at this point, doing films like Aladdin and Lion King, they just kind of feel like cash grabs at this point. This one is not that bad. It still has a lot of problems. In fact, comparatively, it's kind of like Venom, where I understand why people like it. I don't think it's that great, but it does have things that are very enjoyable, and it's understandable why people really dig this film. Now, if you dig this film, if you really like this film, do not let my opinion make you feel bad. I do not want to make anybody feel bad for liking a film. I've had that happen to me. It sucks. I've had people question my intelligence for liking Man of Steel. I do not want you to come away from this video feeling bad for having enjoyed it. There are, however, things that do work, so let's get into those before we get into the negatives. Will Smith as the genie. I kinda liked him. I thought he was one of the best parts. I really dug the magic carpet. I liked the animation on him. Will Smith and the guy who plays Aladdin, they have some pretty great chemistry. Naomi Scott is great as Jasmine. I really liked the Arabian Nights sequence. I liked the change to that too. Now, I love the original. In fact, I recently did a rewind review of the original a couple days ago, so if you want to check out my thoughts on that. But I love the Arabian Nights sequence in this until they start fast forwarding over a lot of the actual story to build things up. But I do love the execution of it overall. The costumes are very colorful, very bright, though they do look more Bollywood influenced than Arabian. That's kind of a detracting. It works and it doesn't work, just considering where it takes place geographically. I really appreciate the choreography. I thought that was pretty neat. And there are some changes to the story that actually do kind of work. On to the negatives, though. Jafar is the biggest weakness of this film. He is not very intimidating, and I'm sure the actor was giving it his all, but he was just not threatening. He was not very menacing, and that's a big detracting point when your villain is not compelling. A lot of the musical numbers fell flat for me. Now, a lot of this has to do with Will Smith not really being a singer. You can tell that they do some auto-tuning in there, and it's not the greatest work. There is a song that they give Jasmine, and the song itself is fine. I think it's called Speechless. It's fine by itself. It obviously does not mix in well with the Howard Ashman and Alan Menken composed songs from the original. And the first time that they do it, it's fine. It's a small little thing. It's a little teeny song that they have. And then there's a scene near the end where things are starting to get good, and you get this good momentum going, and she starts singing it again, but it's in a dreamlike thing, and it feels more like a music video, and it just totally disrupts the flow of the narrative. And I understand why they put the song in there, but that was probably the worst place that you could have chosen to put it. I also have a problem with the third act, or at least certain portions. Jafar does not turn into the giant snake, which is, as a fan of the original, that's kind of disheartening. But instead, they have him turn Iago into a giant parrot. And that totally takes away a lot of what makes that third act in the original work so well. The CGI does not look very good. Abu looks almost exactly like the monkey from the Pirates of the Caribbean films, and I don't know why they always go with a capuchin monkey, but I don't know, it just feels like they haven't changed the monkey model at all in Disney, because if you look at any live action film that has a monkey that needs to perform, it's always that same monkey, and it always looks the same. The genie in some sequences looks pretty decent. In other sequences, it looks pretty bad. We saw this in the trailer, so we kind of knew what to expect on that. I also have a problem with the beginning, particularly the One Jump Ahead song. Aladdin in the original is stealing a loaf of bread. In this one, he's stealing jewelry from people, and that totally twists his character. By having him steal a loaf of bread, he's taking something that can easily be made again. I mean, yeah, he's still stealing, but having him steal jewelry to pawn it off to get food feels kind of out of character for me. I also didn't really enjoy the decision to combine One Jump Ahead with Aladdin meeting Princess Jasmine. It felt very forced. It felt like they were trying to fast forward to the introduction of the genie, and that threw off the pacing a bit for me. Speaking more to the One Jump Ahead sequence, there are a couple of shots where they obviously sped up the footage and it's noticeable and it looks kind of bad. Though the One Jump Ahead sequence is probably one of the most exciting, kinetic song numbers in this film. The only one that kind of comes close is Never Had a Friend Like Me, up until the halfway point. There's a point where it just stops being visually interesting. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that Guy Ritchie is not a musical director. Nearly every musical number in this film is very static. There is very little movement, there's very little cutting, and for these songs, which are very energetic, that feels like a great disservice. I also gotta say that the Whole New World sequence was rather disappointing. It just didn't live up to the original, and I know comparing it to the original is usually not what you want to do, but when it's been done perfectly the first time, it's really hard not to compare it to that. But with all that being said, there are things that absolutely work, and when the film gets into its groove, it really gets into its groove, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy myself to an extent. Would I pay $20 for it on Blu-ray? Absolutely not. But if I saw it for like $8 on Black Friday, I might pick it up. It's not that bad, it's not that great, but it is certainly watchable. I'm going to go ahead and give it a C. Next up we got Booksmart, and this is a comedy about two girls. It's the last day of high school, they spent their entire time studying, they didn't really have much of a social life outside of their friendship, and they want to go to this party the night before graduation, right before they go to college, just so they can say that they did it. This film is hilarious. There's hardly a joke that does not land in this film. This film got a lot of big laughs out of me, and surprisingly, a lot of emotion. It really comes down to the fact that the writing and the acting is just top-notch in this film. We have two characters, Amy and Molly, and they are both likable but also incredibly flawed. Not in a way that makes you absolutely despise them, though there are moments where you're supposed to be upset with them, but you still like them. Molly is very studious, hardworking, I think I'm better than you, I'm going to Yale, just really snooty kind of character. But she's also very likable, and she's also very protective of her friend Amy, who is very timid and trepidatious, and not really quite sure about how to proceed with her sexuality. She realized in the 10th grade that she was a lesbian, but she's never had a sexual encounter, so she's dealing with all of these new feelings and not knowing exactly what to do, while being raised by two Christian parents. And their chemistry is fantastic. You absolutely believe that these two are best friends, and that's what really makes this movie. The comedy is great, but the characters and their relationship is what really drives this thing. A lot of the time, I kept remembering and thinking back to my days in high school, and on top of me feeling incredibly old at this point, it did feel authentic. It very much felt like high school. Granted, it still does have the Hollywood embellishments of what high school is, but it very much felt like high school. There's so much to love about this film, and by the end of the film, you find yourself really tearing up when the characters do eventually go their separate ways. At first I'm like, oh no, I'm not gonna cry, I'm not gonna get upset by this is a comedy. But lo and behold, I found myself getting really emotional when they said goodbye. And it's a sweet film. I really dug this film, and I was surprised to see so many people come and see it, especially the week that Aladdin came out, where just Disney's raking in all this nostalgia money. The screening I went to was practically sold out on a Sunday night, and a Sunday night is usually very, very slow at the theater. So I was very surprised to see that it had such a big audience. It's very funny. There is one thing, though, that I kind of have to hold against it. There are two gay characters, and they do kind of feel like stereotypes. Granted, I do like the characters. They get a lot of funny lines, but they do feel like stereotypes. I don't know if that was intentional or accidental, but it is kind of noticeable and a tad bit jarring. But other than that, I really enjoyed myself. My girlfriend really enjoyed herself. She didn't even think that she was going to like the film, and she ended up laughing out loud just as much as I did, if not more. I'm going to go ahead and give this an A. Absolutely go watch this. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll have a great time at the theater. Check it out. Next up, we have The Biggest Little Farm, and this is a documentary. I have been seeing ads for this film for a couple of months now, and I was wondering if we were actually even going to get this film. We had a special screening, and I figured that that would be the extent of it, but no, we actually did get the film. And I went and I checked it out, and I really enjoyed it. Now, I'm probably not going to add it to my Blu-ray collection. Not everything that I really enjoy has to be bought on Blu-ray, but this one is pretty charming. This documentary tells the story of Mike and Molly, I think are their names, and they start this farm out in California, and the goal is to have this farm just completely natural, in balance with itself, just a natural ecosystem without relying on pesticides, without relying on artificial anything, artificial population control, as natural can get, a solution to every problem being from nature. And it's really cool to watch them just purchase this land that is barren, the soil is dead, there's just acres and acres of abandoned farms for eggs and beekeeping, and they just turn it around with the help of their friend Alan. You just watch them try and make this dream work. This is something that the wife really wanted, and they just keep persevering. And every time they turn around, there's just another problem. One of their pigs is really sick and not eating. There are coyotes, there are gophers eating the plants, there's snails eating the leaves, there's birds eating the fruit. It's just incredible to watch all this stuff happen. And it really gives you an appreciation of nature and all of its intricacies. And it's very, very charming. There's really not that much to complain about in this film. The protagonists are really likable, there's a lot of beautiful imagery, there is some rather grotesque imagery. There's chickens being eaten, there's animals being born, there's a lamb that's born and its intestines are out of its body. But even still, it doesn't feel like it's gratuitous, it feels more like an educational thing, like this is something that can happen on a farm. I don't really have that much else to say about this film. I recommend it if you're into nature, if you're into documentaries. I'm going to go ahead and give it a B+. Next up we have Brightburn, and this is produced by James Gunn. It's the horror film that asks, what if Superman came to Earth and instead of becoming a force for good, became a psychopathic murderer? And that's all it ever does with it. I did not like this movie. As a Superman fan, I found it insulting. As a movie, I thought it felt flat. The acting is fine. There's moments where there's great chemistry between the characters, and there are even some moments where the cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. But then you get into the plot, and it really doesn't go any further or deeper than, what if Superman were evil? And that's it. The characters aren't very complex, there's no real depth given to them. It basically expects you to know the basics of the Superman origin story, and then have you fill in the blanks with these characters. So the mom is kind and believes in her son, and the dad is hardworking and this and that, and that's about it. And then the kid is a kid. But the thing that bothers me the most is there's no actual reason for this kid to turn into a psychopath. The only thing that turns him from a good, well-meaning kid to a bloodthirsty murderer is his spaceship calls to him. And that's about it. There's no psychological building, there's no teen angst, there's no series of events that just make him snap. The ship calls to him and he turns evil. There are some pretty gruesome deaths, and yeah, if you're into just watching a horror film to watch how people die, cool, you'll probably get something out of this, but I absolutely hate the over-reliance on jump scares in this film. There are some moments that are just incredibly laughable. There's a dream sequence where the dad has a nightmare about finding the kid in the spaceship in the woods when he landed on Earth, and I swear they had a doll and they painted it red, and then they had a dimmer for some red LEDs in the eye sockets, and then they just threw the baby at the camera. And then there's a moment right as the credits are about to start, so they have this montage of this kid doing evil things, killing people, and they use a clip from that Billie Eilish song Bad Guy, and it's I'm the bad guy. Maybe it's the fact that I've seen too many Billie Eilish memes, or because it's It's so obvious and dumb, but I just could not help but laugh when that happened. They try to sequel bait and bring in the concept of a Dark Justice League, and honestly, I'm not down for that. I've seen a lot of people really excited about this, and yeah, I kind of get it. It's a twist on the superhero genre thing, but when you read comic books and you play games like Injustice, the evil Superman thing has been done so many times that it's just cliched at this point. So yeah, from a film perspective, if you've only ever watched superhero movies and never read a comic book or played a video game, this is a new idea for you and a new concept and something that's fresh. But if you read anything like Red Sun, or there was an issue of Multiversity where Superman lands in Nazi Germany and becomes the Ubermensch, or if you've played Injustice where Superman just goes bananas, you've seen this before. So it just kind of feels like a half-baked attempt at one of those kind of stories, and it just falls flat. I didn't enjoy it. The characters are dumb. The plot is thin. I'm going to give this a D. There are some things that work, but a majority of it just absolutely does not. And last up, we have Photograph. This is a movie that was put out by Amazon Studios, and it's an Indian film, which was a surprise because we rarely ever get foreign films here, but we got one this week. And the story tells of a photographer, a tourist trap photographer, who takes a picture of a girl, and his grandmother is sick and old, and unless he gets a wife, she's gonna stop taking her medicine. So him and the girl unite to pull one over on the grandmother. Now, this is not a comedy. That sounds like a comedy premise, and if this were a comedy, this would be 1,000% more enjoyable. I did not enjoy this film at all. The characters are very flat and dull, and they don't have much chemistry with one another. There's not enough time dedicated to making you actually care about these characters and the potential for a romance to blossom. I've never seen a film make falling in love look like such a chore, but to my surprise, this film manages to do that. And at the very end, they try to subvert your expectations, and it just doesn't work because they did not build up enough good faith with the viewer to actually be able to pull that off. On top of that, nearly every scene in this film feels bloated and longer than it needs to be. I really did not get a lot of enjoyment out of this film. In fact, I spent most of the runtime wondering when it would get out because I wanted to go home. I know the reception on Rotten Tomatoes is about 77% certified. I don't even think it's that good. This film just didn't work for me. I don't think it's going to stay here very long. I'm going to go ahead and give it a D+. There are things that work. There's some nice cinematography. But for the most part, it's just bland and dull, and the characters are flat. So that's it for this week's episode of Cinema Corral. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. You can follow me over on Facebook at Mario Bennese YouTube, and I will see you later.